My name is William Clark from Fort Worth, Texas, born February of '91. My mother, Janice Clark, my father, Stephen. They set me up in a pretty decent household. For my dad took care of the finances. He worked hard. My mom stayed back home and took care of me, later on my younger brother. And really it was that age that started experiencing some doubts in life. My younger brother seemed to have all the time consumed of what would have been my mother. It was that point that I started just trying to figure out what to do with all the ample time I had on my hands. Early on, I just found my escape through video games, television. Just was really already seeking a way to be able to change the world around me without dealing with it head on. I had a lot of good things going for me monetarily. There was never a lack of food on the table. There was always heat, air conditioning, that sort of thing. To some degree or another, missed out on having a strong maternal figure growing up, which allowed me to learn to take care of myself at an early age. But there was really just a lack of the discipline growing up in that household that I didn't go to school. I stayed back. It was just this hesitancy to be away from home for any length of time. So I did all I could, manipulation, playing hooky, to be able to stay home. And it was kind of at this point that I started getting ingrained in a habit of seeing that I could pretend, and that in turn got me the things I wanted in life. And despite their best efforts, counseling and at an early age, 10 years old or so, being put on different medications to try to fix what I was going through, I will back up and say I had some strong teacher models at that time that showed their expressive concern. That I did eventually get on a decent attendance level and started getting better integrated socially. Again, my dad looking to make a good move for his family. We wound up moving to a new school district over in Eagle Mountain, which was great. There was neighborhood, being a lake community, that being 12 years old and making a friend down the road that they owned a boat, get to go out, learn how to ski and these sorts of things. They were good things. They were good times. I started developing a sense of responsibility by having a lawn mowing company for some of the surrounding neighbors. There's a little joke behind that, in that my dad's boss called me asking me one day if I had a license permit to have that lawn mowing company, and wound up giving me a mowing job out of that anyway. Over the summer of my 6th grade year going into 7th grade, I saw athletics as the opportunity by which would be my footstool for again, just getting more integrated into the social realm of school and having some goals set. Mom actually was able to help me to maintain some strict regimen over that summer, just working out, eating right. And the coaches, once off season came around, were really looking at me. I had size and the ability. 10 days into the off season, I was sitting in our lines one day, and I just felt very lightheaded. I felt like I was going to pass out. My entire face was buzzing. I wasn't sure what was going on. I made it through that practice and through that day, and the next day I just couldn't get out of bed. And this went on for about a week or so. I was just sleeping all the time and felt terrible. Finally, got over to the doctor, which they ran blood tests. The blood tests came back positive, or negative for anything that was showing why that might be going on. Yet I remained feeling terrible. My dad started showing the same symptoms shortly thereafter. Whenever he went to get his blood test done, it proved to be mononucleosis. This advanced into 2 different stages of the mono, which actually had him and I both out of what you would call life for 2 years. I was placed on the school homebound program, where I did have a teacher come and hand me my material to go over. She helped me in that. However, as far as my social life went, I was not developing the skills at that age to just be able to fit in. Again, compounded by my not going to school prior to then. I had a small group that I'd hang out with in the neighborhood trying to get over the illness. I found myself resting throughout the school week, and then for what lack of social life I was having, burn up all my time and energy on the weekend hanging out with friends, and this would deplete me of the energy I needed to accomplish, again, the school week. And my dad had put his foot down, said that I needed to preserve that time and energy to be able to go to school and handle my business. But I wasn't cutting out what little friend action I had, so that was the first time I openly defied him at the age of 14. And that's where not only was I manipulating earlier on, but I was now just completely disobeying anything that they were asking me to do. I took that and ran with it at that point. I saw that they could not control me. And so I eventually got back into school, starting a freshman year in high school. Found some, relief in that for some of the friends I kept up with over the years. Was able to get in there and have somewhat of a social life. I had girlfriends, that sort of deal, went to the homecoming. It was decent for this time period. Hanging out with an older crowd, the seniors, my being a freshman, they were drinking. I heard one senior talk about senioritis, exactly what he described, the anxiety, the restlessness. That's what I felt pretty much the entire duration of my school. I thought, well, I'm already at where you're at, bud. And I just continued hanging around them and going to the after football game parties. Really started drinking pretty heavy. I could hold my alcohol intake and took pride in that. That being the social lubricant that just opened up what I'd hoped football to do for me. And so wore that with a badge of honor for a couple of years. Was a musician, played the guitar that helped get me through those couple years of being down, and this was now something I could utilize in being the center of attention at places. Wound up getting involved with the band that they owned a piece of land in a good rural area, and we hold bonfires and we get our instruments out there and we jam, and people loved it. And we always had the booze flowing aplenty. That was around the age of 16. I had an uncle that at that point allowed me to borrow a vehicle for a time, kind of helped motivate me to get around a bit, get a job. I just did the opposite with it. I saw it as the ability to run around with the crowd I was hanging around, going, getting beer from the shops that would sell it to the minors. I now had, even more reason to continue hanging around and doing the things I was doing. Started smoking pot pretty heavily at this point. I really found that to be a outlet for just any more anxiety that I was having that the alcohol didn't take care of. And I could be alone. I could be content with that. And that's really what I was looking for at that time, was just be able to be by myself and be at peace. Pot did that for me for a while. The people that I was hanging around in order to get this, they also were involved with heavier drugs than what I wanted to be involved with at the time, but it was, they call it a gateway, right? Started running around with the crowd that they were doing cocaine and different over-the-counter cold medicine to get high as well. There was a point that it was like we were just looking at fights around every corner, and there was brands that we were putting on ourselves to initiate into a group, and it was just continuing to spiral down into criminal lifestyle. We were stealing what we wanted in order to means to get the alcohol and the drugs at that point. It wasn't even paying for it. One of the main guys I was hanging around, he wound up passing out in my passenger seat, and I wound up stopping by local Walmart, get a bottle of water out of the vending machine. And there was an evangelist out in the parking lot at this point, and he asked me, he stopped me whenever I was headed to the vending machine, and he said, "If you were to die today, do you know what you would say to get into heaven?" And I said, "No, get out of here with that. I got this guy in the front seat I need to get this water to. I don't know what's going on with it." I said, "Well, would you like me to come pray for him?" I said, No. I'm gonna go ahead and go about my business." Well, eventually we got the guy come to and gave them the story sitting around the group later on that day. And while I didn't want to honor the fella's time that was trying to tell me all that, I still had a certain respect for what he was trying to tell me. This group, they laughed at it, they mocked at it, and that really at the time opened my eyes to exactly who I was hanging around. My great-grandmother, she had instilled in me as an early child that there was this Jesus, and that he had done something good, and he had done something good for me, whatever that was. And because of that, there was a certain level of respect that I held for the church, for aspect of God. This group had none at all. So as a result of that, I deviated from hanging out with them anymore. Having dropped out of school, jobless, no ambition, no plans for the future, I just really started picking up my drinking and using to newer heights, just to blot out the fact that I had all this time on my hands. For the neighborhood I was in, I was the only one doing things I was doing. The other crowd, they were from different parts, but they're in the neighborhood. All these guys, they had future goals, going to colleges and this sorts of things. And I took on a lot of shame out of the lifestyle that I was living. I projected a lot of my issues toward my parents and where I was locationally, and this just continued to be a self-defeating pattern. Well, it was around this time that my mom had started talking to me about reading the Bible, and I knew what the Bible said as far as, thou shalt not kill, thou shalt not murder, thou shalt not steal. I knew somewhat of the commandments, and I didn't need the Bible to tell me I was doing wrong. I knew I was doing wrong, so I did not read. This was over about a 3-week time period, and come to the point where I wasn't able to get things I needed to escape the reality, desiring to escape but not being able to, and I was having these panic attacks. Became suicidal at this point. Interestingly enough, there was a devotional that was left out on a dresser in my parents' room that I passed by this devotional 100 times in any given day and never paid any attention to it. But for some reason at that time, it told me that Jesus had a plan and a purpose for my life. Need to submit to his lordship. Knew very little of what that meant. It sounded a lot better than what I had going on. Christ became my Lord and Savior. I would like to have said that this was just the turning point in my life by which I never picked up another drug or alcohol again, but that wasn't the case. There was the initial honeymoon phase by which I looked up at the sky and the sky was blue. This weight of the world had been lifted off my shoulders. The guilt and the shame that I'd carried around that had been building up was now just instantly gone. And I could walk down my neighborhood road and not have to experience this belittling of feeling like straight filth that I had put on myself. Out of programs like Wiseman Ministries, I started finding relief in some of the defects of living that I'd acquired throughout the years of my youth, the years of being sick. At the age of 19, I entered into my first program, and it was one that was being just in its test phase, and got to meet and experience a lot of good people there that they had also had some similar experiences to me, and that was the first time in my life that I'd been able to speak openly with other people about what was going on with me. They helped me in developing some work ethic and just getting into a standard routine. Been to another program since and even helped to start one. I want to stop there for a minute. In the program that I'd helped to start, got to really see a lot of flourishment in that season. I got to get a little better understanding of how community works at on the giving level. I'd always been on the receiving side. Now I was on the giving side. Got to experience purpose behind that. I actually met my wife during this time. She was the women's director for the women's house of this ministry, and that also gave me the next level of responsibility. There was more than what I was willing to take on at that point, and quickly resorted to drugs and alcohol for a time period in order to cope with the pressures of marriage. And as a result, wound up seeking help again through treatment facilities. This is in 2017, and after having been through a couple of secular programs, finally was referred to come out to East Texas, where actually the program director at the farm at the time had been through one of the programs that I was now retreading. And so I got to the farm, and it wasn't anything like I'd ever experienced before. It's out on 300 acres, and they've got just beautiful piece of property out there. The operation going on at the time was a panel truss, and that to me had a strong appeal to it. It was just this macho sort of heavy duty work that I'd always dreamt of doing. I wound up getting out there and fitting in pretty well. I had some misgivings about 3 months into my first time around that I decided to leave Wiseman. And whenever I had left, really no tools that I was going to be able to utilize. I had more problems stacked up against me than what I knew what to do with. And thankfully, in my contacting them back on several occasions, they have been gracious enough to keep those doors open for me. So long as I was willing to put forth some effort, they've met me more than halfway. My time here at Wiseman, I've held several different roles, responsibilities, being an RL back out at the farm, and that helped again to reintegrate that part of giving back that I had missed out on for those years after helping start the other ministry. Thank you. RL is resident leader. That is for somebody that's been in the program that has shown that they're capable of just handling day-to-day duties in a certain level of integrity. And so these people are then asked if they would like to fill an RL position, at which I accepted. And you get to see, again, more of the inner workings of the program at that point in areas of accountability. Now, that accountability for me has a negative connotation to it because, I essentially think I can do what I want to do. However, I see that that is actually one of the most crucial elements of recovery, in that we have each other to lean on whenever we start sliding back into our old ways. And it's not always pleasant. The Bible says one man sharpens another as iron sharpens iron. Yet, the good news is that once that friction has occurred, you're sharper than what you were before. And so, met a lot of individuals throughout my stay with Wiseman, and just for the different cultural backgrounds and the different goals of where people were headed, I have had time to think on myself of what it is that I want out of life as well. And there's a hope for potential counseling in my future. Just giving back at a more personable level of what I've been given in the aspects of recovery as well as my faith. And I hope to one day be able to raise a family with my wife, that if we have children, that can instill into them some of the principles that I was not given growing up. I don't have any regrets in my life today. My parents and I were on great relationship terms. It's getting better as time goes on. I see that there is a purpose through all of my failure, that God has turned this into something that is a benefit to others, as well as has helped deepen my relationship with Him.